Hello again. Today we're going to be looking at actually a wonderful topic under biology, or this subject called biology. And before we dive into this particular topic in biology, I would like to ask a few questions, or probably one question. How does parasites ensure their survival in the ecosystem? How does parasites ensure their survival in the ecosystem? Actually, the name parasite sends a whole lot of wrong signals to people's imaginations. Of course, parasites are harmful substances. In fact, they don't do well in biological relationship or association. In fact, their association with a parasite is usually harmful. But one thing you shouldn't take out of this is that parasites are also living organisms. They are living organisms. So how do they ensure their survival as living organisms? Remember, one of the characteristics of living things is competition, and one of the purpose for competition as well as adaptation is to ensure survival. So all living organisms tend to thrive in order to survive. So also the parasites. Now, in this topic, we're going to be looking at the life cycle of most of these parasites. We're going to majorly look at two of them. We're going to see how they ensure their survival and how their life cycle goes on and on. So today's topic, we're going to be talking about farm parasites. We're going to be talking about farm parasites. And before we move into this particular topic, there are several things we are also going to be looking at, which we can call subtopics. Several subtopics we're going to consider. The first one, we will be talking about definition of a parasite. I don't have actually mentioned it, but we'll give a detailed explanation or detailed definition of what a parasite is all about. And also, we're going to be talking about the types of parasites. We're going to be looking at the types of parasites. And number three, as a subtopic, we're going to be talking about the life cycle of two named endoparasites, or probably one named endoparasites. And also, we're going to talk about one named ectoparasites and not two. All right, for time's sake, we're going to be looking at just one endoparasite and one ectoparasites. But we're going to mention a whole lot of different types of parasites we have. Okay, so these are the things and areas we are expected to cover in this particular topic. But before we continue or start up this particular topic, there are several specific objectives you are expected to know or should be able to answer, questions you should be able to answer at the end of this class or topic. One, you should be able to define the term parasites. Number two, you should be able to mention the types of parasites we have and their examples. And then number three, since we're going to be talking about only one type of parasites, or endoparasite and ectoparasite, you should be able to describe the life cycle of the named parasite we're actually going to be looking at in this topic, and also the named ectoparasite we're also going to be looking at. And not only being able to mention or describe, rather to describe their life cycle, you should be able to talk about their economic importance and also how to control the activities of these parasites. Remember, we said that these parasites are actually harmful in association or interaction with other living organisms. Okay, so if you are actually set, I'm also set, and I'd like us to begin this topic on parasites. Now, based on definition, what is a parasite? Now, before I continue the definition of a parasite, I want you to understand, anytime I keep remembering this, it's sort of like makes a whole lot of sense to me. It influences what my thoughts so much. Now, if you take a look at a parasite and actually the organism they harm, which is a host, the host is actually bigger than the parasite. Not only bigger than the parasite, the host is stronger than the parasite. However, the parasite still manages to cause harm to this host that is both bigger and stronger. So what is a parasite? So I believe you're already having some imaginations with you as something so small, so little, so small and so little can become so harmful to something that is quite bigger and something that is quite stronger. So we're going to be looking at the definition of a parasite. Now, a parasite is actually an organism. It is a living organism that tends to live in or on. In or on. Please take note of that word, lives in or on another organism, deriving benefits from it, while that organism it lives in or on is harmed in the process. So in other words, we have one, two organisms associating together or interacting together in which one benefits and the other does not benefit. And that one that doesn't benefit is harmed in that process of interaction. All right. Now, the organism that benefits, like we already know, is called the parasites, while the one that does not benefit, that is harmed in the process, is called the host. Now, like I said before, the host is usually larger, bigger, stronger than the parasite. Yet, the parasite always finds its way causing harm to the host. Now, let's take a look at the types of parasites we have. Basically, we have two types of parasites. If you could also remember when I was defining the term parasites, I said they are living organisms that live in or on. And I told you to hold that thought of living in and also living on. Now, that thought actually brings us to the types of parasites. So in other words, we have two types of parasites. We have what we call the endoparasites and we have the ectoparasite. These are the two major types of parasites. Now, what is endoparasites? Endoparasites are actually parasites that live in. They live in, or in other words, you can say they live inside another organism, which is referred to as the host. They live inside another organism or their host, okay? Now, we have several examples of endoparasites. We have the one we called the tapeworm, which we're going to be looking at shortly, because if you check both WIAC schemes or past questions in WIAC and as well as JAMB, where the endoparasite that is usually asked after or questions come out frequently on is actually the tapeworm. Hence why I decided that we should take a close look at this organism called the tapeworm. So the tapeworm is one major example of an endoparasite. Another endoparasite is called Ascaris lumbricoid. Ascaris lumbricoid. Ascaris lumbricoid is actually a roundworm, a nematode. We also have the liver fluke. The liver fluke is also a flatworm, all right? It's also a flatworm like the tapeworm. But Ascaris lumbricoid is referred to as a roundworm, okay? Now, we have the other type of parasites, which we called the ectoparasites. Ectoparasites. Now, just the same way we defined endoparasites as parasites living within an organism or within their host, ectoparasites are parasites that lives on or outside the bodies of their host, outside the bodies of their host. And we have several examples of ectoparasites. It includes, we have the tick, we have the lice, we have the mites, etc. All these are examples of ectoparasites. Now, let's take a little talk about in details, picking one endoparasite we're going to discuss on. And the endoparasite I would like us to look at basically is the tapeworm. We're going to be talking about the tapeworm. We're also going to be looking at what the tapeworm entails, the type of, what I call it, phylum it belongs to, what makes up the structure of the tapeworm, and so many other things we're going to discuss. We're also going to be talking about their life cycle. Remember when we started this particular topic, I made mention of how these living organisms, which are called parasites, how they ensure their survival. So you're going to see that in the life cycle. So in the life cycle, you'll see series of stages through which these organisms need to pass through in order to maintain or continue their existence. And we're also going to be talking about some of the effects which are mostly economic importance. And then we're also going to see how to control them, because they have so much effect on farm animals as well as what? Plants, crop plants. So let's start with the first one, which is called tapeworm. Now, tapeworm is an endoparasite. It is actually a flatworm. If you look at kingdom Animalia, tapeworm belongs to the phylum called Platyhelminths. Now, platyhelminths are actually flatworms. Now, if you also take a look at the structure of the tapeworm, you will discover that the tapeworm has a head, it has a neck, and then it has a long segmented body. Now, taking a look at the head of the tapeworm actually comprises of what we call hooks and suckers. It comprises of hooks and suckers. And it also has a top which is made up of what we call the scolex. In other words, some books will tell you that the head is actually referred to as the scolex. So the head is made up of hooks and suckers. Now, what is actually the major function of these hooks and suckers that are found in the tapeworm? Now, the hooks and suckers in tapeworm are actually used to hold firmly to the intestine of its host. It uses that to hold firmly to the intestine of its host. Also, if you look at the structure of the tapeworm has a very flat body surface, hence the name flatworm. So it has a flat body surface with large surface area. Now, this large surface area helps the tapeworm to easily absorb digested food from its host. Remember, we said it is a parasite. So it deprives its host of food or nutrients from these digested food. Rather, it takes it in, it absorbs it. So the tapeworm does not have any alimentary canal. That's what it simply means. The tapeworm does not have any alimentary canal. In fact, it doesn't undergo the process of digestion. Digestion does not occur in a tapeworm simply because the tapeworm feeds on already digested food. And how does it help? How does it feed from this digested food? It is through what we call absorption. The process of absorbing this digested food by diffusion. Okay, so the large surface area based on its flat body surface helps this thing to take place. Another thing about the tapeworm is that the tapeworm has what we call thick corticals. Thick corticals. Now, these thick corticals are there to help the tapeworm resist the digestive enzymes of its host, because the digestive enzymes of its host can actually damage it. So there is a very thick cortical around the tapeworm and the body of the tapeworm that helps it to resist the digestive enzyme of its host. And also, you should understand that the tapeworm has a body segment which is called the proglottids. Remember when I started about the tapeworm, I said that the tapeworm has a head, it has a neck, and it has a long segmented body. Now, this long segmented body is called what? The proglottid. Now, the proglottid starts from the neck and it extends. Okay, it is arranged in rows up to the end of the body of the tapeworm. Now, the proglottid possesses both the male and the female reproductive system. possesses both male and female reproductive system. So in other words, I can say that the tapeworm is a hermaphrodite. So it can carry out self-fertilization. Is that okay? So it has the male and the female reproductive organs, it means that it has both the male and the female reproductive sex cells. And then fertilization can take place within the body of the tapeworm, and it occurs at the proglottids. Please take note of that. It occurs at the proglottids. So in other words, what we're saying is that the proglottid sometimes contains eggs. Okay, because after fertilization between the male and the female sex cells, what results is usually an egg. What results is usually an egg. So the fertilized egg remains in the proglottid. Okay, now let's move ahead to talk about the life cycle of the tapeworm. It's very exciting, the life cycle of a tapeworm. But before I continue, understand this, that the tapeworm is called Taenia species. Now, the reason why we call it a Taenia species is because actually it's made up of two most important species. We have the one which is called the Taenia solium. Now, Taenia solium is the secondary host to the pigs. You find them in pigs. Then we also have the one we call Taenia saginata. Now, Taenia saginata is actually found in cattle, all right? So the cattle is the secondary host in Taenia saginata, and Taenia solium, the pig, is the secondary host. The primary host of tapeworm is man. Primary host of tapeworm is man. Now, let's move ahead and see how tapeworm ensures its own survival. How the tapeworm ensures its own survival through its life cycle. Now, that is the structure of the tapeworm. Now, how does it carry out its life cycle? Now, remember I said to you that the tapeworm is a hermaphrodite, and simply means it can self-fertilize itself. Now, when it wants to reproduce, one of the mature proglottid or proglottid detaches from it, okay, detaches from it and is removed from the body of humans or man through the feces, okay? So most persons, mostly in the African area, most persons go to defecate or pass out feces on bushes. You say some people pass out feces in water, okay? Now, doing that, if that person is actually infected with a mature tapeworm, it simply means that that mature tapeworm, a part of its proglottids will detach as the person is passing out of it. So a mature proglottid detaches, which carries eggs. And when these eggs now get to the grasses, they can remain there for years, and until probably pigs or cattle feed on it. Now, when this pig or cattle feed on it, the enzyme in this pig, let's use Taenia for instance, Taenia solium, the enzyme in this pig acts on the egg, and then it hatches it or develops it or brings it into the embryo form. Okay, it now develops into the embryo form. From the embryo form, this embryo passes through the bloodstreams and gets to the muscles or gets to the heart of this pig. Okay, when it gets to the heart or muscles of this pig, it also develops. All right. Now, once it develops into a larva stage, it now produces what we call like a cyst that covers it. And it assumes in that cyst form, the head of the tapeworm goes down, and then this coverage or covering covers it. It is called a bladder worm. So it remains in this state called a bladder worm until that particular pork infected with the bladder worm is eaten. Now, most times, some persons eat undercooked meat or probably raw meats, okay? So when raw meat or undercooked pork meat is being eaten, that bladder worm now enters into man. When it gets into man, the digestive enzyme of man acts on that bladder worm, which now releases the young tapeworm out, and the young tapeworm gets to the guts of which is the intestinal walls of man, mostly the small intestine, where food is completely digested, and starts absorbing food that is meant for man to actually absorb. So it starts absorbing this food with the hooks and suckers attached to hold it firmly to the intestinal walls of the man, okay, which is now its primary host. It continues and stays there, feeds and grows. Now, when it develops and becomes mature, the same proglytid detaches from it and gets to the feces, or gets to where the man passes, or the human passes out feces. The same process now continues again. That is why it is called a life cycle. It continues over and over again. So that is how the tapeworm ensures its survival. So it undergoes several stages. Like I said, the first stage, it comes out as an egg. From an egg, it develops into an embryo. From an embryo, it gets to the heart or the muscles of these organisms, or these secondary hosts, which usually can be a pig, which is for Taenia solium, it is the pig. When it gets there, it then grows out a bit and becomes a young proglytid, but it then covers itself in a kind of cyst. Now that cyst, covering itself with the cyst, is called the bladder worm. Now it remains as a bladder worm until it is now taken into the primary host by eating it, by eating the pork meat, or the cooked pork meat, or actually raw pork meat, which has to do with the meat from the pig. Now, when it is eaten, that particular bladder worm is acted upon by the enzymes, digestive enzymes, which now breaks the cyst, and then it comes out as a young proglytid, attaches itself to the intestinal walls of its primary host, and starts absorbing food. And like I said before, the cycle continues again. So that is briefly how the life cycle of tapeworm is, and that is how it ensures its own survival. Now, it has several effects. On man, and it has several effects on also animals. Now, what are some of the effects which we can call economic importance? Now, the effects, the sum total, or the complete sum total of all the effects or the symptoms, or effects or symptoms of tapeworm is called taniasis. It's called taniasis. Now, let's take a look at some of the taniasis or effects of the infection of a tapeworm. One, it causes what we call anemia. Now, anemia has to do with the reduction in the amount of red blood cells, or you can call it a shortage of red blood cells, or reduction in hemoglobin. Remember, hemoglobin has a very strong affinity for oxygen, and it aids the transportation of oxygen from the lungs to other parts of the cells or the body where it is actually needed to cause oxidation of food substances in order to release energy. So when these hemoglobin is in short supply, or in short, they are not much or reduced in the blood, it poses a whole lot of danger, which can also lead to death. Please take note. It can also lead to death. So it causes what? Anemia. Another thing again it causes is weakness. So tapeworm brings about weakness. How does it bring about weakness? Of course, the food that the organism or the farm animal is supposed to eat or feed from, the tapeworm deprives this animal, or actually organism, from taking in those food. And of course, this food, when broken down, they release energy. So when energy is not released as it should be, it brings about what? Weakness of the body. Another effect of tapeworm infection is that it causes abdominal discomfort and pain. It causes abdominal, it causes discomfort, and also it causes what? Pain. Abdominal discomfort causes abdominal discomfort and pain. You see the person infected with tapeworm, they usually feel this pain in the lower abdomen and so on. And another thing it causes, that it causes indigestion, and also it causes vomiting. Now, how do we control tapeworm? How do we control tapeworm? Remember, I told you that one of the ways through which it enters into man is when man eats undercooked meat or man feeds on raw meat. When we eat raw meats or we eat undercooked meat, it is a means through which tapeworm can be transmitted. Okay, can be transmitted. But one of the ways to control it is by cooking your meat properly before eating. Cooking your meat properly before eating. Another way we can control tapeworm is regular deworming. Regular deworming. I usually advise people, I said to, like in my own family, I ensure that they are regularly dewormed once in every 3 months. Once in every 3 months. You regularly deworm yourself. Regularly deworm yourself. It's also a way of controlling the spread of tapeworm and its effect on us. And number 3 is adoption of good sanitary measures. Adoption of good sanitary measures. People should not be going to the bush to defecate, or going to the bush to pass out feces, or to water to pass out feces. There should be good water closets, okay? WCs where people can use, well sanitized, and ensure you wash your hands properly before eating. Ensure you wash your hands properly before eating. And there are so many other good sanitary measures, ensuring that your environment is always clean, always neat and clean, can also help to reduce the spread of these particular harmful parasites. Okay, so the next one we're going to be looking at is lice. Now, lice, if you were with me from the beginning, lice is a harmful ectoparasite. We have just finished and concluded the discussion on one endoparasite. This is an ectoparasite, and the name of the ectoparasite we are going to be looking at is lice. Now, lice are wingless insects. It simply means they belong to the phylum called Arthropodas. Now, they have 3 pairs of legs, which is one of the major characteristics of insects. They have 3 pairs of legs. Their body is made up of a head. They have thorax, and they have what we call the abdomen. Their body is divided into 3: head, thorax, and abdomen. Now, lice, they possess a mouth part modified for biting and sucking of fluid or blood. Okay, their mouths are modified for biting and sucking of blood. Now, lice are ectoparasites to poultry birds. They are also parasites to sheep. They are also parasites to goats. They are also parasites to cattle, and they are also parasites to man. They are also parasites to man. So let's take a look at the life cycle of these harmful ectoparasites. Okay, now we have the life cycle. In terms of lice, there is a male lice, and then there is also a female lice. It is not like that of the tapeworm, that is actually a hermaphrodite, having both male and female reproductive organs. But in terms of lice, they are actually, we can call them unisexual. That simply means that we have a male with a male reproductive organ, and there is a female with a female reproductive organ. Now, an adult female that has been, the eggs have been fertilized, now lays these eggs, all right? Now, these eggs are called nits. She lays these eggs, and these eggs, they attach to the hairs and the feathers of their host. Now, when they attach to the feathers of their host, these eggs start developing. They start developing and hatch into a stage which we call the nymph stage. It hatches and develops into the nymph stage. Now, this nymph stage, at the nymph stage, these, which they call them, these louse, they start feeding. They already have a developed mouth parts, and which is modified for biting and sucking of blood. So they start biting and start sucking blood. Now, as they do this at this nymph stage, they are also growing. While they grow, they molt. That means they shed off their skins. Now, they undergo series of molting, not just once. They undergo series of molting, and this series of molting actually helps the nymph to develop and grow into another stage, which is called the adult stage. So the nymph then grows or develops into the adult stage. Now, it can develop into a male adult or a female adult. Now, as these male or young male adults and female adults continues feeding on this blood, they grow and become adult male and female. When they mate, the female now carries fertilized eggs, lays it also on the feathers and hairs of their host, and the cycle continues again. The cycle continues again. Now, if you have carefully followed me as I explained this life cycle of the louse, you will understand that I made mention of egg, I made mention of the nymph, I made mention of an adult, and that describes an incomplete metamorphosis. It simply means that lice undergoes incomplete metamorphosis. Please take note, lice undergoes incomplete metamorphosis. So that is the life cycle of a louse. Now let's take a look at economic importance. What are some of the effects? Remember, I've said that economic importance includes both the advantages and it also includes the disadvantages. Now, let's take a look at economic importance of the louse. Number one is that they serve as vectors of diseases. Vectors of diseases. Now, what are vectors? Vectors are actually small insects that are capable of transmitting diseases from one person or one place to another. So in other words, louse or a louse can also be a disease vector. It's a disease vector. So it spreads diseases to both man and animals. Next is that its bite, the bite of a louse causes irritation of the skin. You can see that on the screen there. It causes irritation of the skin and also causes restlessness. Of course, imagine yourself itching uncontrollably, or you've seen a dog having louse. They itch angrily and they become so restless. Okay, so the bites of a louse causes irritation of the skin as well as restlessness. Another thing, again, number three, they can lead to low productivity of animals. It causes animals to go beyond productivity. They actually reproduce, or production is actually low. If it affects farm animals, the production of these farm animals will be low. Another one is that they suck blood, which can also lead to anemia. I have mentioned what anemia is. Anemia is just simply the loss of blood, okay, the shortage of blood, or you can say the reduction of blood. So it can lead to anemia. It can also lead to loss of weight, right? And then also it can lead to death. So these are some of the economic importance of louse. Now, quickly, let's move to control measures. How do we control a louse? One of them is to keep your environment clean, having good sanitary measures. Keep your environment clean, ensure the grasses are cleaned, ensure everywhere is well dusted, and even your outward environment, not just inside the house, but also your outside environment. And another one again, another way of controlling lice is avoid overcrowding of animals. Now, when animals are overcrowded in a particular place, it is easier for lice to infect the other animals that are not actually infected. And then number 3 is regular use of chemical solutions called ascaricides on these animals in order to destroy them. There are several types of anti-lice creams, anti-lice oil, anti-lice solutions in the markets today that can actually help to reduce the spread of lice on farm animals. Now, before we go, I just want us to take a look at we've just been talking about farm animals, the parasites of farm animals. Now, what about parasites of plants? Plants also have their own parasites. There are also parasites that have, or other plants that affects plants negatively. One of them, I'm going to just also be talking about 2 of them. One of them is called the Duda plant. Now, its scientific name can be called Candida filiformis. Candida filiformis. Now, Candida is a plant that carries out or undergoes complete parasitism. In fact, it is regarded as a complete parasite. Now, how does it look like? It is actually a thin thread-like stem which normally curls around the stem of another animal or another plant. Now, Candida has no root, and it also has no what? Chlorophyll. It doesn't have roots. It doesn't have chlorophyll. It's just a tiny thread-like stem that coils around the stem of another plant, which is referred to as the host. There it is. So it just coils around. Now, how does it carry out its parasitism? Now, the Candida actually from time to time or intervals releases suckers. Now, these suckers, they penetrate deep into the stems, and they penetrate and they meet with, or they get to the phloem tissue of their host. Now remember, the phloem tissue is actually a tissue that helps to conduct manufactured food from the leaves to the roots, to the stems, and other parts of the plants. So when they get to the phloem tissues, they start absorbing already manufactured food. So they absorb already manufactured food, thereby depriving those plants from the food they have already manufactured. And of course, definitely it will cause harm to these parasites. And then finally, another type of plant parasite is mistletoe. Mistletoe. Mistletoe, unlike the Duda plant, mistletoe is a partial parasite. Duda plant is a complete parasite, but mistletoe can be regarded as a partial parasite. Now, why is mistletoe regarded as a partial parasite? Remember when we said talked about Duda plant, we said the Duda plant releases what we call releases some coily substances now which penetrates through the stem, and they get into the phloem tissues. But in this case, and we also said in the Duda plant, they do not possess what? They do not possess chlorophyll, and they do not possess roots. But in mistletoes, they possess roots. Sorry, they possess chlorophyll. It simply means that mistletoe can undergo photosynthesis. It can manufacture its own food. Hence, we said it is partial parasites. Now, how does it become a parasite? Now, mistletoe is found to grow on another parasite, but it releases its roots. Its roots, remember I said it possesses roots, and also it possesses what? Chlorophyll. Now, what it does is that it releases its roots, which penetrates into the xylem tissue. In Duda plant, it penetrates into the phloem tissue, but in mistletoe, it penetrates into the xylem tissues of its host, where it absorbs water and mineral salt from its host, so that it can manufacture its own what? Food. So that it can manufacture its own food. So this is the way mistletoe carry out the process of parasitism. So this is where we're going to call it a wrap up on this particular topic on farm parasite. Remember, we have just discussed the definition of farm parasites. We've also talked about the types of farm parasites. We said we have both endo and ectoparasites, and then also we've also looked at animal parasites, which include Ascaris lumbricoid. We talked about the liver fluke. We gave an example of tapeworm, and then we majored our concentration or discussion in details on tapeworm. We looked at the body structure of the tapeworm. We also talked about the life cycle of tapeworm, and then also we looked at economic importance and also how to control it. And then we also talked about ectoparasites. We picked a particular ectoparasite, which is the lice, and explained a little about the lice and talked about its life cycle, economic importance, as well as its control. And then also we looked at plant parasites, of which we mentioned two of them. One of them is the duda plant, as well as the mistletoe plants. Now, before we go, let's take a look at least just one more question because of time. Let's take a look at one question using the ExamGuide app. Now, let's look at this. Okay. Now, you'll find most of these questions, sometimes they ask these questions in theory questions. You see it also in JAM and so on. But look at this. The young proglottid is represented by, now that is the structure of a tapeworm. What represents the young proglottid? Now, number one is the scolex. So it is not the correct answer. Number two is the hooks. So it is also not the correct answer. Number three is the suckers. So both scolex, hooks, and suckers, I told you they comprise or they make up the head of the tapeworm. And I told you that the tapeworm has a head, it has a neck, and then it has a long segmented body. And the long segmented body, we called it what? The proglottid. And I told you that the proglottid starts from the neck. So the correct answer to this particular question is option B. Option B, which is Roman figure 4.